Hello everyone, and I'm here with my first what if on Lilo and Stitch. I am talking about the remake. I'm not talking about how much I hate it because I already discussed it in an earlier video last month. I'm just gonna discuss a certain direction the remake could have taken. One that could have perhaps made me liked it a bit more. And it would have elevated from it being a bad film to a decently good film. And that when you think about it, it would have made way too much sense for that to happen than what ended up happening. That, of course, being why the villain was a new character instead of Jumba. Here's what I'm going to say. So, the beginning. Keep it the way it is. Keep it the way it is. However, there are some things I wish would have happened, like, no offense to Hannah, whatever her last name is, Wanningdom. I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but I also wish they got Helen Mirren or Kate Blanchett to play, hey, the Grand Councilwoman. I'd say the latter because it would have been one of the few times where we would have gotten a Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon crossover because Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois did both films. It would have felt like the closest thing to a crossover, even if it's not an official crossover, but still. As for Jumba, really wish they had gotten Seth Rogen to play him, or even Danny McBride, or Jess Winfield to reprise his role from the Stitch anime. As for Peakley, I'd say Tim Blake Nelson. Now remember that one scene where Stitch and Jumba were playing chess? Yeah, there would be Gantu. I'm still unhappy with his exclusion. Now I try to give him a bigger role in the plot, but that didn't work out in the end. Who could I have seen as Gantu though? I think Dwayne Johnson or David Harbour would have been perfect, honestly. But let's just move on. But he would have been playing chess. Almost the film doesn't really change a lot. Like the beginning, up until the scene where you get introduced to Lilo, she pushes Myrtle off the stage, but here's the big change. A lot of the students who are watching begin laughing and humiliating Lilo. Like, some of these would actually be some of the evil YouTubers who would grow up to be who they are now, like Nick Bate, Adam Lanza, Randy Stair, and I think that, oh yeah, and Elliot Rodger. And rather than Lilo being expelled, she gets kicked out for like 2 days. Like, she can't come for 2 days. And then we get to Naughty. Now, when Nani comes home, apparently, rather than Mrs. Cocoa coming, this is where we get introduced to the villain. Agent Dean Maelstrom. Or more likely, Victor Maelstrom. Played by Christoph Waltz. Yes, I'm choosing Christoph Waltz because I honestly feel like he'd be a good fit for a Disney villain. Now, what Maelstrom wants to do is this. He has the same goal as Mrs. Cocoa, just separate Lilo and Nani. And of course, when Maelstrom and Nani enter the house, Maelstrom turns the song Lilo was listening to off. And of course, he sends Lilo to her room upstairs so that way she wouldn't be involved with the conversation he's going to have with Nani. Now, Nani would have expected it to be Mr. Bubbles, but Mr. Bubbles would be taking the day off. Because he's busy spending vacation with his family. Now, of course, Maelstrom would have been talking to Nani about what happened at Lilo's hula class today with Lilo pushing Myrtle off the stage. Nani would tell Maelstrom that they don't get along very well, so she kind of expected something like that to happen. And that Myrtle does pick on Lilo, so it's not really anything new to Nani. It's not really anything new. Maelstrom then tells Nani that it's normal for children to tease, but it's not normal for them to push others off the stage. Meaning that, in his opinion, it's fine if they tease each other, but when they push others off the stage, their actions start to go too far. And he even gives Nani 3 days that if Nani doesn't complete her task, he will make sure that Lilo is removed from her custody permanently. And he hopes he makes himself clear. Nani then understands, and then Maelstrom leaves. Lilo then comes downstairs. Nani then stops Lilo, and then sends her to where Nani is sitting. And of course they would have a scene that's similar to that in the new Superman movie with Lois Lane interviewing Clark Kent, in which Nani would be asking Lilo different questions like, why didn't she win hula class? Does she want Maelstrom to separate them? Does she want to be an orphan forever? Lilo does not want this, and so she goes upstairs, and Nani's like, fine, go upstairs. And Lilo could tell Nani that, you're starting to sound like our aunt! And of course, Nani, he just doesn't care, and Lilo just slams the door, and then they facepalm, knowing that they were unsuccessful at communicating with each other. Movie's then the same, but rather than David's grandmother taking Lilo to meet Stitch, that would be Lilo and Nani's aunt, who would be played by Tia Carrere. Because you'll see why I included their aunt in the first place. It is kind of like Stitch and Ai, where Ai and her sister only have an aunt because their parents died. And here, Maelstrom would know it's been a while since Lilo and Nani's parents died. However, the car crash thing would not be mentioned because if they were really going to change it, they should have just said our parents were killed. But don't have that be important till later on. Now, in terms of David's grandma, she's not removed, just changed to being David's mother. And that would mean changing her name to Mother in Hawaii. Makuhain? Yeah. That's what mother means in Hawaiian. But David would probably call him Mama. Now, in terms of why David looks nothing like his mother, it's because he looks more like his father, who would have been mentioned to have passed away sometime before the events of the film. But when Lilo and Nani's aunt takes Lilo to the animal shelter where Stitch is kept, a lot is pretty much the same. Especially with Lilo and Nani's aunt leaving Lilo and Stitch by themselves because their aunt is going to talk with David's mother. And when Lilo and Nani's aunt drop Lilo and Stitch off at Nani's resort Lulu job with David, the shenanigans would remain the same. But after Nani is fired and Lilo and Stitch have to return home with Nani, we see someone watching. This would turn out to be Maelstrom. And then we see Myrtle and her friends talking to Maelstrom as they're trying to find Lilo to give her some payback. However, Maelstrom tells Myrtle that she and her friends need to leave this problem to the adults, especially him, and that he's going to take care of it himself, whether she likes it or not. And what does he do next? He slaps Myrtle across the face, and then he causes the four of them to run off. Maelstrom smiles, knowing that he doesn't care if he hurts a child or not. And he doesn't care if that will happen to Lilo. He then sees the two hoses Lilo and Stitch were playing with, and he comes to the conclusion that Nani is not even a good fit for Lilo at all. This was rather dangerous. The next morning, when Nani is visited by Mrs. Cocoa and Mr. Cobra Bubbles, not Mrs. Cocoa, just Mr. Bubbles, that scene would remain the same. However, Mr. Bubbles would be insisting that Nani needs to find new employment immediately. And for the CIA agent who's posing as the social director, Mr. Bubbles is social director, this would probably have been someone like his wife, who I could picture Viola Davis playing. Same shenanigans happen. The same shenanigans where Nani is rejected after many interviews happens. And of course, Lilo could still help Nani secure a job as a surfing instructor, but however, when things don't go out well, I don't know what would happen. I guess maybe she fails and considers the idea of quitting. But then David comes and saves the day like in the original film, but not without a challenge from Stitch. Because the two have a game of rock, paper, scissors, which he usually had with Lilo before, her parents died. Oh, and I would drop the whole our parents left behind thing with our parents were killed. Because I hated that a lot. And if I wasn't watching the remake, I would have turned it off at that scene or another part, which I will get to later. However, back to where I was, since I was off topic for a moment. Stitch and David play some rock, paper, scissors. And apparently, because Stitch doesn't know this game, it kind of leads to David winning in the end. And of course, Hawaiian roller coaster ride happens like in the original film, but it's more like in the original film. Jump Up Peakley fail to capture Stitch while jet skiing. And movie is then the same up until where we get to the hospital, in which Maelstrom would come to Nani and he tells her he will remove Lilo from her custody tomorrow morning. Because after numerous failed tasks, he is going to remove her from her custody permanently. Nani would, of course, tell him that he can't do that, and Maelstrom tells her that he can and he will. And that as a consequence, he is also taking away Nani's right to go to college. And then Maelstrom tells her that he will be back for Lilo tomorrow morning. And Nani feels heartbroken. She couldn't believe that Maelstrom is going to make her miserable and is destroying her life piece by piece. She doesn't want to tell Lilo that Maelstrom's going to take her away in the morning. So she decides to keep it a secret so that Lilo isn't heartbroken. The two sisters then share their final night together. Stitch watching sadly. He almost feels like he was responsible for all of this. It would turn out that Stitch has taken the book of Lilo and Nani's family before the events of the film, and it's implied that Lilo and Nani's parents were killed by a criminal. It is kind of like mixing Spider-Man with Batman in a way. And Stitch would see a flock of ducks, reference the Ugly Duckling story, and Stitch decides to spend the night sleeping in the forest and decides that he needs to save Lilo and Nani from Maelstrom. Speaking of Maelstrom, there's a scene where he's at the animal shelter and that he plans on making sure that Stitch won't interfere with his plan of removing Lilo from Nani's custody, because he believes Stitch was the reason why Nani was failing her task, and he comes up with several different ways. Think of the traps like an over the hedge, like booby traps, you know, when Stitch would return to the animal shelter, if he were to return. And he gets AJ's sister, Susan, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, to bring him a bird, and then Maelstrom would grab his gun out and shoot the bird, killing it. It'd be off screen because Disney would not want to show this because animal deaths would not be on board for a Disney film. And of course, the two are in shock to see Maelstrom do something like that. And they know if this were to happen, Maelstrom is killing an animal. And that they, in turn, do not support animal abuse at all in the slightest. However, Maelstrom just silences them. And then leaves. And then the next morning, when the Grand Councilwoman is frustrated with Jumbo's failure to capture Stitch and cancels their deal and orders Peakley to return Jumbo to prison, Jumbo escaping Peakley and planning to capture Stitch instead. Yeah, instead of Jumbo sending Peakley to, like, the storage, I think it was. I don't remember what that was. He sends Peakley to, like, the CIA service. And rather than Mr. Bubbles and Mrs. Cocoa arriving to find that Lilo is missing, there would be a scene where Mr. Bubbles and Maelstrom are out of the base, and Maelstrom is getting ready to leave so he can take Lilo away from Nani in the morning. Mr. Bubbles would try and stop Maelstrom from going because Mr. Bubbles knows that Maelstrom is going to ruin their lives and that Maelstrom is going to take Lilo to an orphanage. The same orphanage where he used to work out but was kicked out because he mistreated a lot of children there and was even abusive towards his ex-wife, which led to their divorce. But Maelstrom does not care and tells him that he will stay out of his way and that he will make sure that any caretakers like Nani are dealt with and finished. And that he did the same thing with his abusive father, which does mean he killed his abusive father. It's not shown, but it is clear that he killed his abusive father, and it can be implied that he may have murdered Lilo and Nani's parents. And then Maelstrom leaves, taking Mr. Bubbles' car. Even though Mr. Bubbles doesn't know that's his car, then a disguised social worker comes, gives Mr. Bubbles like a folder, and guess what that is? Maelstrom's history. Mr. Bubbles then comes to the conclusion that Maelstrom is a more dangerous person than he realized, and so decides that he needs to save Lilo and Nani immediately. Nani then gets ready to leave, and that she's leaving Lilo home alone because Nani has to talk with their aunt. Lilo then leaves the house after Nani leaves. And Lilo then finds Stitch at the shelter. Well, not the shelter, but in the forest. Jumbo arrives to recapture Stitch. However, remember the house fight? Yeah, that goes out identically the same. Except the way it starts off is that the portal gun would have Jumbo get sent immediately to the house, which leads to the identical version of the house fight. And when Lilo finds out that Jumbo's an alien, she could have the same reaction she had to Peakley when she found out he was an alien. During all of this, Nani is talking with her aunt about Lilo being removed from her care. Nah, the aunt knows that it's hard for her to live without Lilo, but she would get out the same speech Mr. Bubbles had in the original movie to Lilo. I know you're trying, Nani. I know you were trying hard. But sometimes you need to think about what's best for your sister. It is a little tweaked, but still. Nani then tells her aunt that she's going upstairs so she can calm down. As she goes upstairs, she goes into her room, which was actually the room she had when their parents were still alive, because their parents used to take them to their aunt's home all the time. And of course, there would be a scene where Nani finds the memory book, and during the flashback scenes, I would picture Rose's theme from Titanic playing. And of course, we would be able to see Lilo and Nani's parents. Who would have played them, though? I'd say Jay Hernandez as Lilo and Nani's father. As for her mother, it was hard, but I'm going to say maybe someone like... Let me research Hawaiian actors. I would say maybe Maggie Q could work. I'm not familiar with her, but I could possibly have seen her as the mother. Now, a lot of you may be asking me which side of the family is Lilo and Nani's aunt on. The father's side or the mother's side? Probably the father's side of the family, or even the mother's side. More likely the mother's side. As Nani takes a deep breath, she hears the house fight. She overhears it, and even hears the car that's coming to their home. And so decides that she needs to leave. She even tells her aunt that she's leaving, and then they say goodbye. Now, remember when Jumbo revealed that Stitch was using Lilo for his protection, which led to his guilt-ridden surrender? Yes, here's a twist. Instead of Stitch surrendering, he tricks Jumbo and then gets onto him. I was thinking of including some clawing and scratching, but Disney would likely reject this because this would push up to a PG-13 rating. So I could picture like Stitch grabbing onto Jumbo and Jumbo tries to take Stitch off of him until they crash out of the house. Lilo tries to catch up with Stitch and Jumbo, but however she sees a car. She thinks it's Mr. Bubbles due to the similarities. However, this turns out to be Maelstrom, and then Maelstrom would put his hand on Lilo's mouth and grab her by the hand and then open the door and place her in the car. Like, it'd be the seat next to the driver's seat. And then he slams the door. Nani would overhear all of this, and Nani would try to open the door, but then Maelstrom would appear and then slap Nani across the face, giving Nani what she deserves for surrendering custody of Lilo. In the remake. And then Maelstrom would put Nani in handcuffs, and that she will never see Lilo again. He even calls the police on Nani, telling them that Nani slapped him across the face, placing the slapping incident on Nani and not telling the truth. He then ends the call and tells Nani that Lilo will be put in an orphanage where she'll never see her again, and that if Stitch were to intervene, he'll make sure he's out of the way, and that Nani will be left behind. Nice reference to Family Means No One Gets Left Behind, by the way. And then Maelstrom opens the door and slams it and then drives off. Nani then puts her head down, knowing she can't believe that she's not only going to jail for something she didn't do, but is never going to be able to see Lilo again. But then she hears something in the bushes. At first she thinks it's just the wind. And so she puts her head down again, but then the sound starts to get stronger, and then a sharp bite breaks the handcuffs. And this turns out to be Stitch. She backs off at first, but then Stitch calms her down. And then he reveals something to Nani. It's the picture of the family before, the parents died. During this scene, I can picture the music Sacred Conversations by the 126ers playing. Perfect music for this scene, by the way. This would, of course, then lead to Stitch and Nani having that whole Family Means No One gets left behind scene from the original movie. I'm really upset they left that scene out. Jumbo and Peakley then appear in. Stitch then gives Jumbo the picture of the Palkia family, and of course we see flashbacks detailing how Jumbo became the way he was. His ex-wife mistreated him, and he had a really special relationship with his mother. Yeah, it's sad. Nani would then ask Jumbo and Peakley if they're going to save Lilo. And then, of course, they do agree that they are going to save her. And they even give her that portal gun. And Jumbo and Peakley would likely know where Maelstrom is taking Lilo. We then cut to a scene where Maelstrom is driving Lilo in his car. Lilo is miserable, but Maelstrom tells her that she shouldn't be miserable because she's going to make a lot of new friends at the orphanage, and that he used to work there. However, his car starts to run low on gas, and so they go to a gas station. And so Maelstrom puts the gas container in the car, and then he leaves to use the bathroom. I'd say to wash his hands. However, as Lilo is alone, she hears something. That happens to be the sound of a portal, and that turns out to be Nani and Stitch coming to her rescue. And then this leads to Stitch and Lilo hugging, like in the original movie, when they first met. Nani then gets into the car. As soon as the gas is done, the car then begins to drive off. As soon as Maelstrom leaves the bathroom, he sees the car driving off, and then confronts the grocery store worker, telling him to call the police, but the grocery store worker tells him that he saw nothing, and then Maelstrom pulls out his gun at the grocery store worker, telling him not to lie, and then the grocery store worker begs Maelstrom not to hurt him, and then Maelstrom tells him, "I'm not going to hurt you." And then he shoots the grocery store worker, killing him. And then, of course, this would be another off-screen gunshot. And then Maelstrom leaves the grocery store, where he is then jaywalking as cars are still driving. One car stops in his way, and that happens to be the car Lilo's teacher is driving in. Moses, whatever his last name is. Maelstrom then opens the door, tells Lilo's teacher to get out of the car, and her teacher doesn't know what he means, and then Maelstrom grabs Moses and then throws him out of the car, and then gets into the car and slams the door and then drives off. Mr. Bubbles then appears as soon as Maelstrom left Moses. Moses then tells Mr. Bubbles about the situation, and then Mr. Bubbles says that he knows what to do due to a fellow social worker and a bunch of terrified people at the grocery store reported. As soon as Lilo and Nani and Stitch are in Maelstrom's car driving, Nani then sees the teacher of Lilo's car, like the car Lilo's teacher drives in, which she finds strange because normally he doesn't drive up to them. But then it turns out this is actually Maelstrom when she further dissects the issue. And Maelstrom is trying to shoot at them, but is shooting at other cars. And he's committing reckless driving and reckless endangerment as cars begin crashing. Lilo then tries to find Stitch, but Stitch is out of the car, giving Lilo a thumbs up, knowing that he's going to take care of everything. And then Maelstrom would try to shoot at Stitch, but Knowing that he's smart, this leads to him jumping off from car to car, and then Stitch would land on the car Maelstrom is driving, and we get that dialogue from the original movie of, "You're vile, you're how? You're flawed!" As Maelstrom is trying to shoot Stitch. However, he sees Jumba and Peakley in Jumba's ship, and then he tries to shoot at Stitch. However, he shoots at one of the wings from Jumba's ship, and that causes the ship to crash land in the water where the beach is at. However, Peakley and Jumba get out the last minute by disguising themselves as humans and using a pearl gun to get out. Lilo and Nani then drive the car to the beach, where they drive past the ice cream man as the ice cream flies off. They go to a cliff so that no innocent people are involved. Even the police arrive. And then, as one police officer comes out, Maelstrom grabs a speaker and then tells Nani that she's under arrest for assault, kidnapping, reckless driving, and reckless endangerment. And he tells her that if she gives Lilo to him, he will let her go and everything will be done with. But if she refuses, she'll be taken away to jail or she will die. And he forces Nani to choose. Even when Nani refuses to give Lilo up to someone like Maelstrom. As Maelstrom is about to shoot Nani, Mr. Bubbles comes in, and their confrontation would be similar to that one scene where General Rogard confronts Kent Mansley in the Iron Giant. One of my favorite movies by Brad Bird, by the way. And Maelstrom would try to tell Mr. Bubbles to get out of his way, and Mr. Bubbles refuses to get out of Maelstrom's way, and then he reveals to Maelstrom about his crimes, which include mass murder, indirectly and directly, implying that several people died during the car chase, patricide, animal cruelty, psychological abuse, assault, child abuse, domestic abuse, reckless driving, reckless endangerment, slander, blackmail, and jaywalking. And Mr. Bowles tells Maelstrom that he will lose his job as a social worker, a CIA agent, forever. And that he will no longer be allowed near any more children, especially the ones he's hurt. Maelstrom couldn't believe this. Not only is he losing a lot of jobs, but he's being given a restraining order from being near children, allowing them to be safe from them being hurt by him any longer. Maelstrom then steps back. As one officer is about to handcuff him, Maelstrom would go, "Screw family! I don't care if people like not get left behind." As he would shove one officer out of the way and then take his car and then drives off, preparing to escape. Now, that saying of "screw family, I don't care if people like Nine get left behind," that would be a scene where Mr. Bowles tells Maelstrom that he is trying to destroy Lilo and Nani's family image. That family means no one gets left behind, and Ohana means family. Lilo tries to find Stitch, but Nani and disguised versions of Jumba and Peakley point to Stitch at the center of the trees, and Stitch stops the car Maelstrom is driving from getting away. Maelstrom then kicks the door open, knows that Stitch should have, or at least he should have known that Stitch would be the one to stop him. And as he's about to shoot Stitch by grabbing out his gun, he is tased by a police officer and then is placed in handcuffs. And then there would be a scene where Mr. Bubbles tells Nani that Lilo will be back in her care as a result of this. But he should be the one that's thanked for. It would be a disguised Peakley who gave Mr. Bubbles all the information. And of course, there would be a scene where Maelstrom is seeing all of this, and he shouts, "I'll get you to one day, and your little pets too!" And then Maelstrom is placed into the car, and then the door is slammed on him, and then the police car drives off as Maelstrom is going to prison. The same thing with the Grand Councilwoman happens next. However, Jumbo doesn't get arrested. Instead, Lilo begs the Grand Councilwoman to let Stitch stay with them. And the Grand Councilwoman does make this decision that Jumbo and Peakley would also have to be on Earth as a consequence. And then Lilo hugs the Grand Councilwoman, telling her it's the best decision she's made. And then the Grand Councilwoman and her soul troops leave. And then as the ship leaves, a thunderstorm begins to happen. David then appears, telling them that he can take them to his mother's house. And Nani tells David that her and Lilo's aunt is there. And then David's like, I should have known. We then cut to a scene where they're at the house of David's mother. The gang is at the house of David's mother. And we get a scene where Lilo is drawing a picture of Pudge the fish control in the heather. And tries to show it to Stitch, but Stitch then leaves because there would be a song that plays to catch Stitch's attention, in which that would be My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. She then tells Peakley and Jumbo they need to find him. Nani then tells Lilo that she's going to need an umbrella because it's raining. And then, as the three leave, they find 625 and 604, aka Ruben and Houdini. Houdini disappears after he is spotted, and then Ruben escapes. Lilo tries to catch up, but Jumbo tells Lilo that they need to be careful due to the rain. And then they go to the beach where Stitch is at, but he has other experiments other than just Ruben and Houdini by his side. They are Spooky, Sample, Sparky, Felix, Slushy, Richter, and lastly, Angel. Lilo comes to Angel, and Stitch initially defends Angel, but Lilo tells Stitch that she wasn't going to hurt her. And then Stitch walks back, and this allows Angel to walk up to Lilo. Lilo even asks Jumbo and Peakley if they can keep the other experiments, and Jumbo would tell her that if she got her hands on 626, so can the others. And then she smiles and then tells them that they're going to be the best uncles she's never really had. And then they begin to walk off. 3 months then pass. It's September, because the events of the film would likely have been taking place in June, and Lilo is starting school again, but by this point, it's Nani's birthday. Lilo, Jumbo, Peakley, Stitch, and Lilo and Nani's aunt would be taking Nani somewhere for her birthday, and this turns out to be a new job for Nani, which is the Hawaiian Aquarium, which is Nani's dream. And then she thanks them and that this is the best birthday she's had in years. And that she tells Jumba, Peakley, and their aunt to take care of Lilo for her while she's gone. Yes, this does address the controversy with Nani surrendering custody of Lilo and the controversial ending. We then cut to a montage where, after they agree, we cut to a montage of the Lilo, Stitch, and the experiments' his daily lives. And then, of course, the film would end with everyone from Lilo, Nani, their aunt, Stitch, the experiments, Jumba, Peakley, Mr. Bubbles, David, and his mother having a family photo taken by someone like Susan or AJ or that old lady from the original movie who would be played by Oprah Winfrey. And then as soon as the picture is taken its place to the picture of the old family photo before Lilo and Nani's parents died. There'd then be two after credit scenes. One where it cuts to a year later and we see Stitch, Angel, Sparky, and Ruben hanging out, and then Lilo comes home. She's 7 at this point. It would be established that Lilo was likely born in 1996, and of course Lilo brings in a new friend. That would be Yuna from the Stitch anime. I would actually picture one of Ken Watanabe's granddaughters as Yuna. Stitch would come to Yuna. Yuna's initially concerned about Stitch, but then she pets Stitch. Like in How to Train Your Dragon when Hiccup pet Toothless. This would have been done because Lilo would tell Yuna that it's okay. And then, of course, she tells them that they're going to be good friends. And then that scene would end with Yuna and Stitch smiling at each other. But then there's another after credit scene where someone is watching the night to observe the place, and Echoes of Time by Kevin MacLeod would be playing. The person that's watching would turn out to be Dahlia, who I could picture being played by Kristen Ritter, as she's seen like the Lilo being tucked into bed by their aunt, her and Nani's aunt. I would actually picture their aunt having custody of Nani and Lilo at the end. And Dahlia would contact not only Gantu, but Dr. Hamsterville, who would be played by Guillermo Artios, who would actually sound like Maximilian de Robespierre from Mr. Peabody and Sherman. And of course, she tells him that she's found 626 and Jumba now living on Earth, and that some new experiments are born. And that they'll manage to make sure to take care of them with experiments of their own. Like, the hologram would show experiments like 627, Leroy, Dark End, and Scratch. And this would set up the sequel that, while according to rumors, this is going to be an original story, this might be the case still, but would take elements from the Stitch anime. But still, the movie would end there. So that's what the villain of the Lilo and Stitch remake was, a new character. You can very well call this my rewrite of the Lilo and Stitch remake. You very well can. I'm not stopping you. I'm totally up for that. But anyways, I hope you all enjoy this. I hope you all appreciate the fact that I was able to address a lot of the criticisms of the original of the remake. But anyways, I'll see you all later, because Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind or forgotten.